Okay, so this workshop is actually the first one that we're offering in Omeka since we just started having Omeka last year, and a lot of people at MSU don't know how to use it yet. So this is the first of what will hopefully be many workshops offered in the future. Um, so let me stop sharing my little title slide here, and I'm going to switch over to my browser. And it looks like somebody else just joined us. EJ Walker. Okay. EJ, we are recording this session, so if you have a question at any time, you can either unmute your mic and ask it that way, or you can type your question in the chat, whichever way you prefer to do. All right, so what I'm sharing now is kind of a quick cheat sheet to some of the things I'm going to be talking about today, and I'm going to paste the link to it in the chat so you can bookmark it if you want. This is just so you don't have to feel like you don't have to take notes or anything like that, and it has some links to some of the things we'll be talking about. So in order to use Omeka at MSU, the first thing you're going to need to do is submit a proposal for your exhibit, and that's the first link here on this little cheat sheet. You can also find this under the research guides on the library's website. So the first thing you're going to need to do, like I said, is submit a proposal, and that link is right here. And it's going to ask you some questions about what you want to do with the site and all that good stuff. And then the other important thing on this research guide is the documentation. That link is right here. And the main thing here is it tells you the rules, and then it also has the style guide for the metadata. I'm going to be talking about that a good bit later, but here's the link for that. And I also linked it in the Google Doc. I linked the metadata cheat sheet, so you have a direct link to that. I thought that might be handy to go ahead and put in the document. Okay, so once you have submitted your proposal, and we're going to assume that it got approved and you have been sent a login to MSU's Omeka dashboard. And if you're using Omeka at another institution, which Elaine, you might be doing, I'm not sure, the dashboard should look pretty much like this. I'm not sure how your institution does Omeka proposals and that kind of thing, but once you're in Omeka, it should look like this, or mostly like this. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is create a collection. And you click here where it says collections, and the collection is where all of your items go. This is not your exhibit. You can think of it kind of as a folder where you're keeping the items before you put them into the exhibit case. That's how you can think of the collection. So you can see that there's a few collections here that we already have. And since only one of these is mine, that's the against all odds here, that's the one that I have the ability to edit. So you can see the other collections, but you can't edit them or do anything to them. So other people will be able to see your collection, but they won't be able to make any changes or mess it up, so don't worry about that. So let's just go into a collection just to see what it looks like. So I'm going to click on mine. And all this is it just shows you your most recent items. It tells you whether or not the collection is public. And in order for your exhibit, the items in your exhibit to be visible when you finally do publish it, your collection needs to be public. So you can click on edit, and that public checkbox is right here. So keep in mind, there's several components in Omeka that you have to make public before your entire exhibit will be visible. So the first thing you'll need to do is make sure your collection is public. All right, so once you've made your collection, and again, just think of it as a folder where you're keeping your items, the real work, I would say, in Omeka comes with adding items. And this is where you're going to add your images, your documents, whatever your collection is going to be composed of. Think of these as each of the objects that you're putting on display in an exhibit case. So again, you can see all the other items that have been added. there's a feature where you can search items by several different ways. So if you need to find some of your items to make some changes, you can do that. You can search by collection, so it'll only show you the items in your collection. You can search by tags. There's all kinds of different ways you can search, and this is very useful. I've used it a lot. So let's talk about adding an item. We're going to click this link here that says add an item. And if you look on the little cheat sheet I made, this is the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today. So when you click add an item, this is the screen that you're going to get. And the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you select what collection you're going to put this item into. For this imaginary item, I'm just going to say test collection. And let me go and find an image to put in it. So let's just say I'm using this picture. And normally this is not how you put items in a collection, obviously, because this image is probably under copyright and I can't just use whatever I want, but this is just to use as an example. Okay. So let's say I want to put this item in my test collection. You can do these different tabs in any order that you want, and each of these tabs is explained on the cheat sheet, and I'm also going to talk about them now. Usually the first one that I go to, just to make sure that I remember to do it, is I click on Files. This is where you actually upload the file you're going to use, so I usually just take care of that first. So let me find my little sloth. I guess this is it. So I go ahead and select it. And if you're adding multiple files, like for example, if you're adding a multiple page document, or if you're adding photos that go together for whatever reason, you can click add another file. And I'll show you later how that's displayed, but basically it shows, it has like little buttons with 1, 2, 3, and next. And so people can navigate through them. I tend not to put images together unless I really need to, and especially if it's a document that goes together. But generally, I try to add one item at a time. So let me click back over to Dublin Core. And this is probably the part that requires the most work on your part. Dublin Core is basically the information that you're adding about the image. When somebody clicks on the image, it's going to show this information. And if you scroll down, you're going to see there are a ton of boxes. But don't freak out. You don't have to use all of these. Not all of them are required. It's basically just some very basic ones that are required. So you can see, obviously, title is required. And on any of these boxes, you can click Use HTML. And if you click that, it gives you the option to use like bold and italics, and you can add links. So you can format these if you want to. The exhibit that I do has a lot of newspaper clippings, and so I would use HTML in the title, and I would put like the title of the newspaper in italics. So you can use that however you need to. If you don't have anything in your title that needs formatting, you don't need to click Use HTML, but it's there if you want it. And most of these fields have that option. But again, you might not need to even use that a lot. So let's just say that my sloth comes from the Clarion Ledger for whatever reason. And if you scroll down, the next required field is the description. And I'm just going to put picture of a sloth. Scroll down some more. Again, these are only fields that you use if you feel it would be helpful. You do not have to use them. Creator is the next required field, and I'm just going to pretend that my sloth picture was taken by a man named John Smith. They do ask for the creator field that you use Library of Congress subject headings. So you can look those up on the Library of Congress subject headings site, or you can see when I started typing it in the correct format, it gave me some suggestions of people that it might be talking about. So let me show you, since you're not librarians, probably, well, I think Elaine might be, to find Library of Congress authority headings, if you want to search for them, you can just type in LC authorities into Google, and it's this very first result here. And you click search authorities, and then you can just search for whatever your topic is. And so you'll be using these authority headings in the creator field and in the subject field, which we'll get to in a second. So again, just go to Google and just do a search for LC authorities and you'll get this site. And then you can just copy whatever the official subject heading is. Most of them are pretty straightforward, but in history you tend to get some weird ones, especially for American history. For example, the Civil War is like United States -- history -- it's a bunch of different things. But again, if you start typing, a lot of them it'll give you a suggested person. So let me just say that maybe this sloth picture was taken by Annie Leibovitz. And oh, she does not have she must have one and I just don't know what it is. I'm just going to stick with John Smith. We'll pretend that's a real guy. Okay, so I'm going to keep scrolling. Contributor, this is somebody who obviously contributed in some way to the item, but you don't need to fill this out unless it applies. But if it does apply, it's very important that you use it. That's why this field is marked highly recommended if known. The date is the next big required field, and this is on the cheat sheet, but just remember that for dates, the standard format is the year, hyphen, the month, and then the date. So that's how you're supposed to do dates. And again, if you forget, you can go look at the cheat sheet. So we're going to scroll down a good bit now because there's a whole bunch of different date fields. Then we get to the subject field. That's your next big required field. And I already saw on the Library of Congress authorities that sloths is a subject heading. And here it is again when I start typing it. So I'm going to select sloths for my subject. And you can add more than one. You can separate them with a semicolon and add more. So I don't know if this is a real subject heading or not, but I'm just going to use this for an example. So maybe I wanted to use that. And we're going to scroll down a little more. The next type of item that's required, the next little box, is type. And you can use this box, but you don't need to if you go to these top tabs. If you select the item type on this tab, you don't have to put it again in the item type box. But for most cases, but if you want to, you can. Let me find where there it is. You can put it in both places if you want. The most common ones you'll be using most likely are still image if it's a picture, or text if it's like a letter or a newspaper clipping, something text-based. So I'm going to say this is a still image. Format is encouraged. You don't need it as much for digital items, but you would want to use it if you are using a physical item that you found in an archive. For example, if you're using a photograph that you found in our special collections department, you're going to want to measure it and make sure that you have the dimensions and everything. If you're in an archive and you forget to measure it, it's not a big deal. You can leave this field blank. But if you can fill it out, it would be nice. And I think that covers all of our required. Oh, here's one. Rights. Right here, you can put public domain. You can put Creative Commons. If you have a question about whether or not what your object falls under, you can email Marianne Jones, and they have her email address right here. She's our scholarly communication librarian, and she can help you work out what copyright statement you use here. For the most part, you can probably put public domain or Creative Commons. If you're using an item from our archives, you might want to just put copyright Mississippi State University Libraries. The main point is just to make sure you give credit where it's due. The publisher, this says required, but most of your items are not going to have a publisher probably, especially if it's just an image. So it says required, but you're probably not going to be using this field unless it actually does have a publisher. We'll just say it's required if it does have a publisher. Okay, so those are the fields you really need to worry about. And again, I know this looks like a lot, but once you get used to doing it, you kind of just get into a flow of doing it, and it goes by pretty quickly, and you get better and faster at filling it out because you know what you're doing. So after you do your Dublin Core, you're going to click on the tab for Item Type, and it's going to give you a drop-down box. And again, the most common that you're going to be using are still image and text. In this case, for my little sloth picture, I'm going to say still image. If you do choose text, it's going to give you an option here with the text box. And again, you can use HTML if you want. It's going to give you a text box, and you can use that text box to transcribe the item. Or if it's a text item, you can also click on this Scripto tab, and you can enter your transcription here. Either one of these places is fine for your transcription. For my collection, for my exhibit, I used the text box here. I never used the Scripto tab at all. I just skip it. To me, just the fewer tabs you have to remember to use, the better, but it's however you want to do it. So if you choose text, you can use this text box to put a transcription. Transcriptions are not required, but they are extremely, extremely highly encouraged because people with screen readers need those transcriptions. Plus, it makes your item more searchable. So if somebody's on Google and they type something that is in the document that you transcribed here, it'll come up in their Google search results, and it'll help people find your exhibit. So both for accessibility and for search purposes, you really need to get in the habit of transcribing your documents. Okay, so that's the item type, and for this one I'm going to choose still image because it's a picture. And you don't have to worry about either one of these. You can see that it's repeating the original format fields from the Dublin Core. And if you already filled those out there, you don't have to fill them out here. So files, we already chose our file because I like to do that first. And then your last tab is tags. This is totally optional, but I do recommend using tags just because they help. It's just another way for people to find your items. So for this, I'm going to put sloths, and I'll just put wildlife just so we can have more than one. And then you have to remember to hit add tags. If you don't remember to hit this button, it's not going to save it. So I added those tags, and now I'm going to click add item. And now my item appears, and it says private, and we're going to talk about that later. Each item has to be approved by the site administrator, and I just realized that one of my items she has not approved yet. I need to email her about that. So a private image you can see, but obviously the public cannot. So if I click on my little item that I just added, if you want to see what it's going to look like when it is public, you can click on this link here that says View Public Page. And this is what it's going to look like. There's all your metadata that you added. There's your picture, and they can click on it to see the bigger version. And here's where your tags appear. So if somebody clicked this and there were other pictures of sloths on this site, it would show them as well. So, and it also gives a sample citation for people using this. So John Smith, which I made up, Clarion Ledger clipping, also made up, Mississippi State University libraries, and it gives them that sample citation. So that's how you add images. Let me close out of that. And let me show you on my exhibit and maybe some others what these items, when you add a real item, what it's going to look like. So here's some newspaper clippings. I'm just going to click on one, and here's what they look like. If you added more than one item or more than one image that goes together, this is where that's going to show up that you did that. It's going to have more than one number, but this is just a single picture. And here's all my information. There's my official subject heading. You can see that I transcribed it. And you don't have to do this, but I did. You can cross-link these in the transcription field. If you use HTML, you can link that. So if somebody comes directly to this page from Google and they're like, what is this? They'll be able to link directly to the person that it applies to. It's just so you don't have this stranded item from Google search results and people don't really know the context of it. And there's my tags. So I have a bunch of items tagged with this man's name. So here's an example of when you have a bunch of things that use a tag, and you can see it's really helpful. It puts it all together. Here's an example that's not a person's name. So like conventions. And there's a lot of different articles for a lot of different people that use that tag. So tags are really useful. You don't have to use them, but I suggest that you do. Okay, so we've talked about adding items. Does anybody have a question about any of this so far? One thing I do want to point out on the little Google cheat sheet, I do provide the email of our metadata librarian, Lauren Geiger. If you have any help, or if you need any help with any of the metadata fields, like you're not exactly sure what to put there, or you don't know if something fits or whatever, you can email her and she will help you figure out what to put there. So there's just a quick summary of all those tabs on Add Image that we just looked at. And I just want to emphasize again, it might seem like a lot to do, but the more you get used to it, the faster it goes. So next we're going to move on to actually creating your exhibit. So for this part, we're going to click on Exhibits. And you can click Add an Exhibit right here. And again, just like with items and collections, you're going to be able to see everybody else's exhibits, but the only one you can actually edit is your own. So I'm going to click Add an Exhibit, and let's just say sloths, a pool exhibit about sloths, add a description. You can tag it if you want. Tags are not as important on the exhibit level as they are on the item level, but again, you can add tags here if you want. You can also choose a theme. We have a few. They're hopefully going to add some more in the future, because if you've visited other Omeka sites, you've probably seen some pretty cool layouts. We don't have any of those yet, but we do have a few choices to go with. So Berlin is the default. That's the one that you were just seeing on my exhibit. But let's choose seasons. And seasons actually has, it's one theme, but it has several different color layouts that you can choose. So you can click, if you choose seasons, you can click configure, and you can choose a style sheet. They have spring, summer, autumn, winter, and night. So let's just say I want to use summer. I'm going to click Save Changes. And then you can add stuff here if you need to. And if you want to see what this is going to look like, again, you can click View Public Page. At any point, you can see how your exhibit looks so far and edit based on that. So here's my sloths exhibit using the spring theme. So one thing I want to point out right here is some of our themes are not great for people who have visual impairments. So you might really like a color scheme, but people who can't see well would not like it as much. So this exhibit has some real, this theme has some real problems with visual accessibility. So just try to keep that in mind when you choose your theme. And if you don't like that one, you can just change it right over to another one, save the changes, view public page, and there's this has a little bit better contrast. So you can play around with these themes. You can just switch them back and forth. On the Thanks Roy theme, you can actually edit your colors if you know how to use use color codes. If you don't, just don't worry about it. So I'm going to click Save Changes. And here's what that theme looks like. Again, kind of a problem with contrast on this one. It might be harder to read for people with bad vision because that gray doesn't stand out a lot on white. But just play around with those and decide which one you want. For this, I'm just going to choose a random one. I'm just going to make it autumn. And there's our exhibit. So once you've decided how you want it to look and you've filled out all your information, this is where you actually start adding the pages. So I'm going to click Add Page. and you're going to give it a title. This is going to be the official title that appears on the page, and then the menu link title will be how it appears, obviously, in the menu. And let me show you on my exhibit what some of these elements look like. So in this case, you can see this link I have here, list by county. I have it in all caps. I have it to appear in the menu in all caps, but when you click on it, the title, well, this layout puts it in all caps, but the title officially is not in all caps. But the title is what appears here, and the menu link is what appears here. Page slug, you can just leave that alone unless you, this involves the URL of the page, and you don't need to mess with it at all unless you just want to for whatever reason. You could make it shorter or something like that. So let's just say I started typing something. And I want my menu link to just say sloths. And let's just say I want my page slug to be just sloths. If I didn't do that, the page slug would probably be something like, I love sloths with hyphens. Let me show you what yeah, so here's the page slug for this page. It's usually just whatever the title is with hyphens in it. And you can see this one, sorry, my little WebEx menu dropped down there. This is the page slug for this page. So if you want the URL to look cleaner, like I could have changed this slug to be just Albright, for example, but I didn't. I just left it alone. Most people just leave it alone, and that's fine. So then you can select layouts of the different blocks that you're going to use on your page. So you can select file with text. I'm going to choose that one to start, and I'm going to say add new content block. And you can add your item. So I'm going to add my little sloth picture. You can add a caption. And there's that item. And then you can put some text here. Okay. And let's just say this is all I want on this page. So I'm going to click Save Changes. Once you save your changes, just like with a lot of the other pages on Omeka, you can see what the public page is going to look like. So I'm going to click that, and there's what it's going to look like. So that's what that kind of block looks like, where you have just an item and then text about it. Another type of block you can add is a gallery. This displays as thumbnails that people can click on to view the full-sized object. So I'm just going to add a bunch of things here just to show you what it's going to look like. And I think that's a pretty good gallery. So once again, I'm going to click Save Changes. And then I'm going to click View Public Page to see what it looks like. And there's what it looks like. This is your block that you did image with text or item with text. And this is your gallery block. And you can click on one of these, and it takes you to the item page where it shows you all the metadata. And there's other types of blocks you can use as well. These two will probably be the most common that you're going to use, but there's a text-only block that you can use. There's file, and for this one, you could add like a PDF or something. If you want people to be able to download a PDF, you could do that there. Image annotation is a little more complicated. It lets you choose parts of an image that you want to talk about. So for example, if you made let's say you had like a work of art, like a classic painting, and you wanted to highlight elements of the painting and talk about it, like over here in the upper right corner, you can see the artist's use of shadow or whatever. You can annotate the image like that. And like I said, it's a bit more complicated. You have to position things, but so if that is something you want to use, I've never used it personally, but if that is something you want to use, you'd probably have to learn how to use that bit. but you can annotate images in that way. But again, most of the things you'll be using are probably file with text and gallery. So let's say I'm done working on this page now. I'm going to click Save Changes, and then I'm going to go back to my exhibit. And you can do that with this little breadcrumb trail here. I'm going to click on Sloths, and it takes me back to my exhibit page. And there's my page. Let's say I wanted to add another page. I'm going to click Save Changes. I'm going to go back to my exhibit and scroll down, and there's my new page. And you can drag and drop these in whatever order you want. So if I wanted blah blah to be the first page, I can do that. You can drag them around. You can also create sub pages. So if blah blah was a sub page of I Love Sloths, you can drag it a little bit over to the side, and it puts it under the sloth tab. So let me click Save, and you can see what that looks like. There's my pages. There's sloths, and there's my blah blah page underneath sloths. So you can give your pages a hierarchy if you need to. You have an option to start the exhibit on the summary page or start on the first exhibit page, and you can use this checkbox to toggle that. On my exhibit, it just starts with the summary page. So it just has my description and everything. I didn't create like a first page. It just starts right on the summary. And that's kind of an easier thing to do, but you can do it either way. You're also going to want to select a cover image. This is the one that I made for my site. And one of the reasons you want to do that is if somebody is visiting our library's collections and they click Browse Collections, or if they come here from the library page, you can see that, let me browse exhibits instead. You can see that the cover image displays here on the side, and it just looks nicer. So for example, this exhibit doesn't have a cover image, and so there's no pretty little cover image for it. So that's why you want to add a cover image. But, you know, it's fine if you don't. This one's fine without it. I just like having it for mine, personally. And if you're thinking about making an exhibit, I do recommend coming to this page and browsing to see what's already here, just to get some ideas for what some other people did. Kate Gregory made this exhibit on Sonny Montgomery, and she actually laid hers out as if it was a physical exhibit. So she called it like Case 1, Case 2, and Case 3. And you can see she has items with little text descriptions by each one, just as you might see in a regular exhibit in a museum. The exhibit on MSU Poets, it uses pictures of different poets. So if you click on Catherine Pierce, well, there it is. So they have a picture of her in a biography, and then they have a sample of one of her poems. So this is something you can do. And you can see these are using different layouts as well. I think so far everyone at the library is using either default layout or the Hey Roy. I don't think anyone is using seasons, not because they're not pretty, but because the text, the color contrast are kind of problematic. So there's women's suffrage. So you can just get an idea of how different people have done exhibits here. And again, hopefully in the future, we're going to have some more layouts to choose from. So does anybody have any questions about anything we've talked about so far?
Hey, Didi, why are there so few theme options?
Just because the themes are complicated to install, and right now the people in our digital access unit are working on some complicated website stuff, and they just haven't had time to mess with themes. So I think those are the two factors. They're kind of a pain to install, and they're busy.
Okay.
But
And I was also wondering about the plugins. I know Omeka
yes,
can do a lot. You can do a lot within an exhibit through certain plugins. So I was wondering about downloading plugins for if they might be useful for our future exhibits.
yes, we do have some plugins already installed. One of them is this option here for batch upload. I have not used this yet, but it is an option. So if you have a whole bunch of items that are all going to have a lot of fields that are the same, then this is an easy way to add them, and that way you can just go back and edit specific parts that you need to, but you could have certain fields already filled out for every item in that collection, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Another plugin that we've added is, let me go into the item edit thing to show you where it is. The whole thing with the subject and the creator field, where if you start typing, it gives you suggestions for the Library of Congress subjects. That is a plugin. Omeka Basic doesn't have that, so that's a really handy one. And there's some others. So if you're on Omeka's website, sorry, my little WebEx thing came down again. If you Google Omeka plugins, and if you find one that we don't have that you would like to see added, I would recommend sending an email with the link to the plugin to Emily Harrison. I'm putting this in the chat, and Stephen Cunetto. And they can discuss whether or not we'll be able to add those plugins. Some plugins mess up our Omeka site for whatever reason. They've tried to do some in the past that messed up our site. But I think most of the ones that we've added recently have been fine. Yeah, so you can see they have a ton of plugins. So if you go through these and you see one that might be cool for an exhibit that you want to do, just send an email to them, and they'll see about adding it for you. And I think their links or their emails might be on the Omeka guide. Let me see. Yes, so if you're on the Omeka instruction page here, there's Emily. So you can contact her from there as well if you forget her address. And I also put her email down here. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Once you are ready for your exhibit to go public, all of your items will need to be set to public, and Emily is the only person who can do that. So you're going to have to email her and say, hey, my exhibit's ready. Please make all the items in such and such a collection public. So if I go to the item list here, you can see my little sloth is private. And this item that I added way back in April is still private, I guess because she just overlooked it, or I forgot to email her. One of the two, I don't know. But she's the only one who can make this public so that it will actually appear on the page in my exhibit that it's supposed to appear on. So make sure when you're done that everything, your collection, your exhibit, it's all set to public, and then email Emily for her to make your items public. Once everything is public, your exhibit should appear on this exhibit page here. Anybody have any other questions about how to work anything or metadata, whatever you're thinking?
Well, I guess I'm wondering about the student's ability to use Omeka. Like from what I've seen, I mean, it's just 5 exhibits, right? But it looks like these are kind of, officially sanctioned. People who work for the library are making these exhibits, and I'm wondering if there's a way to use it in the classroom where it's less, I don't know. I'm not sure what I mean, but
no, I get you.
Where it's not like it doesn't have to be like a library official kind of exhibit. Can it exist on MSU's server and it just be a student project, I guess?
Yes, your students could make exhibits here and they would appear here, and I can click on, even though this is not my exhibit, I can click on it and I can look at it even though it's not my exhibit. And this is not the public version, this is the server version. So they could make an exhibit that only you could log in and look at, and it would never have to be published. But that said, they really want to encourage student use of this site. So maybe they could have it just here until maybe a professor approved it, and then it could be added to MSU site so it can be seen by anyone. Um, Another option would be to create an exhibit for your class, and then maybe each student, depending on how in-depth you want their exhibits to be, each student could have a page of the exhibit, and that way it could just be an exhibit of the exhibit could be modern civil rights history, and then each page could be done by a different student. So you could do it that way, especially using the subpages. So if the student had a bunch of different pages in their exhibit, they could put pages underneath each other. So you could do it that way, or you could have their exhibits just live here and never be public. Either way you want to do it, but they do want to encourage students to use Omeka. The only reason that right now only library people are on the exhibits is because so far we're the only ones who know how to use it, and we're the only ones who have done it so far.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. Well, hopefully we will have some student use this fall. So I
That'd be
appreciate it.
fantastic. Any other questions? One thing I did forget to say, because it didn't pop up to remind me to say it, is that I did put this in the cheat sheet. It's a weird thing. It might only be in Chrome. I haven't tried it in other browsers, but you will frequently, when you're working on your exhibit, you will frequently get this message that asks you if you want to save your work. It happens whenever you're switching between pages. So if I wanted to edit this page, see, it just did it. It just said leave site. I haven't even made any edits on this page. So anytime I click any page in my exhibit, it says changes you made may not be saved, even though there aren't any changes. And that might just be Chrome, but it's just a weird quirk. It's going to happen a lot. Don't worry about it. As long as you saved the page, your changes are fine. See, I just clicked save and it just did it, even though I just clicked save. So if you're worried about it, you can double click it just to make sure, but as long as your changes are saved, that error message is pointless, and I don't know why it keeps doing it. So just be aware of that. It might just be in Chrome. Well, if you ever have any questions, you can refer to this little cheat sheet I made. You can email me, or you can refer to the email addresses for specific topics. So, for example, again, if you had a question about metadata, you would probably want to email Lauren about that. She's our expert on that. When you want to make your items public, make sure Emily's the one you're emailing. But if you have general questions, you can feel free to email me. You could also email Emily with your general questions. She could answer those as well, whatever you prefer. So yeah, if nobody has any questions, oh, let's see, Elaine. Oh, okay, just a comment. If nobody has any other questions, that'll be it. If you do have questions, feel free to go for it before we leave.
That's it for me. Thank you, Didi.
All right, thanks. Let me stop recording.